Welcome to True Horror Vault. The world's deepest darkness does not always hide in the night sky. Sometimes, it conceals itself beneath the pitch-black waters of the ocean, thousands of feet below, where even sunlight cannot reach. America's coastlines, old cargo ships, abandoned fishing trawlers, and luxury cruise liners carry not only the memories of countless people, but also numerous unresolved mysteries. There are many such incidents for which official explanations have never been found to this day. The survivors have said the exact same thing for years. There is something in the nighttime ocean that is not human. Today's story comes from the personal experience of a former American merchant marine who worked off the east coast of the United States. He requested that we keep his identity private. Therefore, replacing his real name, we are introducing him as Ethan. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and sit back, because today's story begins on a ship where everyone was alive. But at midnight, an extra passenger stepped aboard. Story 1. The name that wasn't on the manifest. My name is Ethan. It was October 2019. I was working as an electrical technician on a medium-sized cargo ship departing from the port of Norfolk, Virginia, USA. Our vessel was carrying equipment from New York, heading through Florida toward the Gulf of Mexico. Our captain was Captain Miller. He had spent nearly 30 years in the Navy. He was a stern man, but he was never one to get spooked without reason. It was the second night of the voyage. The ocean was unnaturally calm, so calm that the water surrounding the ship looked like black glass. It was around 1 a.m. I was inspecting the electrical panels down on the lower engine deck. Suddenly, the lights throughout the entire corridor went out for a single second. Then they flickered back on. This happens occasionally. I didn't think much of it, but after the lights came back, I saw a man standing at the very far end of the corridor. The man was soaking wet. Water was dripping from him. Drip, drip, drip. He was wearing an old-style Navy cap. His clothes looked as though they belonged to a bygone era. I assumed he was a new crew member. I shouted out, "Hey, what are you doing down here?" The man didn't answer. He just stood there. As I took a few steps forward, he turned left and stepped directly into the darkness. I ran to that spot, but there was only a solid steel wall. No door, no human, only a few wet, bare footprints on the floor. I reported the incident to Captain Miller. He wasn't surprised in the slightest. Instead, he asked very slowly, "Did you see his face clearly?" I said, "No, sir. I just felt like he had been underwater for a very long time." The captain stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then he said, "After tonight, do not go down there alone." I asked in confusion, "Why?" He simply replied, "Because on this route, sometimes an extra passenger steps aboard." After that, he didn't say another word. The next morning, I tried to forget the incident, but by noon, something even stranger happened. Our radio operator, Sam, suddenly made an announcement over the ship's PA system. All crew members were ordered to report to the main deck immediately. We did a roll call. Everyone was accounted for, but the computer's digital crew count showed 21 people, even though there were only 20 of us. The system was displaying an extra person. We thought it was a software glitch. However, even after restarting the system 3 times, the count remained the same. Captain Miller's face went completely pale. He said in a low voice, "It has started again." That very night, Sam and I went down to inspect the lower storage deck. Our flashlight beam swept across the steel walls. Suddenly, we heard the sound of someone walking slowly. Thump, thump, thump. We thought it was another crew member. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. The sound stopped. We moved forward. Suddenly, Sam grabbed my arm tightly and whispered, "Ethan, look over there." I looked. At the far end of the storage room, a man was standing. For the first time, I saw his face. His eyes were completely white. His skin was bloated. Seawater was dripping continuously from his mouth. He slowly tilted his head. Then, without his lips moving, a sound echoed directly into our ears. "One more." My entire body went numb. Sam screamed and ran. I bolted right behind him. From behind, I could clearly hear the sound of wet footsteps. He was coming right after us. We slammed the door shut, but on the other side of the door came a scratching sound. Slowly, 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 as if someone was trying to slice through the steel with fingernails. Then, absolute silence. The next morning, when we opened the door, there were 5 deep gouges in the door frame, on a solid steel door, as if cut by massive iron claws. But the most terrifying part was yet to come. Captain Miller showed us the ship's old logbook, an entry in the logbook, date 1978, the same route, the same ocean, the exact same location. It read 1:17 a.m. The crew count shows 1 extra person. Multiple members spotted a drenched sailor. Shortly after, the chief engineer fell overboard and went missing. My hand began to tremble, because we had seen that man the previous night, at precisely 1:17 a.m. It was the final night of our journey. I couldn't sleep. Suddenly, at my door, knock, knock, knock. I asked, "Who is it?" Captain Miller's voice came from the outside. "Ethan, open the door." I was about to open the door. Right at that moment, Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. "Everyone stay in your cabins. Do not open your doors. I am on the bridge." A chill ran down my spine. Then, who was outside my door, I slowly looked through the gap at the bottom of the door. I saw 2 wet, bare feet. Seawater was trickling down from them, pooling in front of my door. Then, the same voice spoke again from the outside. "Ethan, I know you are awake." But this time, that voice was no longer Captain Miller's. It felt as though someone was mimicking his voice. I didn't open the door all night. When morning came and I opened the door, no one was in the corridor. There were only long, wet footprints that led straight to the ship's railing, and down below was only the pitch-black Atlantic. After returning to port, I resigned from my job, but the incident didn't end there. 2 months later, Captain Miller called me. His voice was trembling. He said only one thing. On the new ship as well, the crew count is showing 21 again. Then the line went dead. That was our last conversation. 3 weeks later, I learned Captain Miller was reported missing at sea. His body was never found. Even today, whenever I watch videos of ocean voyages late at night and see a lone figure standing in the distant fog, I turn off the screen, because I know some passengers never buy a ticket and their names are never written on any manifest. You are listening to True Horror Vault. Sometimes the ocean swallows someone whole, and sometimes it gives them back. But the person who returns, do they truly remain the same human being? Our next story took place off the coast of Alaska, USA, in the ice-cold waters of the Gulf of Alaska. This experience was sent to us by a former deckhand on an American commercial fishing boat. For security reasons, his real name is being kept confidential. We will refer to him as Jacob.
Story 2. The Man Who Returned from the Sea. My name is Jacob. Back then, I worked on a commercial fishing boat operating out of Kodiak, Alaska. Our captain was Captain Ross. He was a man of few words, but he knew the ocean better than he knew people. It was the last week of October. The weather forecast was good. Yet, you can never trust the sea. That night, around 2:30 a.m., we were pulling in the nets. Suddenly, an abnormally large wave struck our boat. I lost my balance and tumbled onto the deck, and my coworker Ryan fell straight into the ocean. Man overboard. We all started screaming. Searchlights were turned on. Life rings were thrown. But the water was so violent that within seconds, Ryan was swallowed by the darkness. We searched for nearly an hour. The Coast Guard was contacted. Finally, Captain Ross lowered his head and said, "He's gone." Surviving in that ice-cold water for more than 10 minutes is nearly impossible for a human. We turned back toward the port in silence. No one spoke a word. It was around 4 a.m. I was cleaning the deck. Suddenly, someone behind me spoke. "Jacob." I turned around. My heart felt as though it stopped beating. Ryan was standing there. His entire body was drenched. His lips were turned blue, but his eyes were completely lifeless. He spoke very slowly. "It's so cold." I ran and called Captain Ross. Everyone came out to see. Ryan was truly standing there. But no one could understand how he had returned, because the boat had never stopped. And from where he fell, our location was at least 5 miles away. We gave him dry clothes. We offered him hot coffee. He consumed nothing. He just sat there. A strange, salty odor emanated from his body, as if he had been underwater for days. I sat next to him and asked, "How did you survive and get back?" He looked at me and whispered, "I didn't come back alone." My entire body shuddered. "What do you mean?" He gave no further answer. He simply stared out the window toward the Black Sea. The next morning, we were supposed to reach the port. However, the GPS suddenly stopped working. The compass began spinning erratically. On the radio, there was only static and voices. "Come back. Deeper. Down." The Coast Guard was calling us. We couldn't hear them clearly. They later reported, no response ever went out from our boat. At noon, I went down to the lower storage to fetch ice. Ryan was standing there, in the dark. I asked, "What are you doing down here?" He turned around slowly. Water was dripping from his face. Drip, drip, drip. Then he said, "They want to come up." My heart slammed against my chest. He raised his finger and pointed downward, toward the floor of the boat. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It sounded as if multiple hands were scraping their nails against the metal hull from underneath the boat. Not just one person, many. That night, Captain Ross decided that Ryan would be taken to the hospital upon docking. However, he was nowhere to be found. The entire boat was searched thoroughly. He was gone. Suddenly, a sailor screamed. We ran out to the deck. Ryan was standing at the very edge of the vessel, facing the ocean, as if he was conversing with someone. Yet there was no one visible. Captain Ross shouted, "Ryan, come back." He slowly turned toward us. On his face was a smile that could not belong to a human. Then he said, "They are waiting." And he leaped into the sea on his own. We switched on the searchlights immediately. But what we saw this time, I will never forget until the day I die. Ryan was not alone. Surrounding him, just beneath the surface of the water, dozens of human-like shadows were floating. They were all reaching their hands up toward him from below. And Ryan willingly descended into their midst. A few seconds later, everything vanished. Only the sea remained. Only the waves. After the incident, the Coast Guard conducted an investigation. Their report stated, Ryan fell into the sea and went missing. There was no physical evidence of his return. However, our entire crew told the exact same story. Even today, a sentence remains written in Captain Ross's old logbook. The ocean never returns anyone for free. I never worked in deep waters again, because I know some people are not saved by the ocean to be returned. Instead, they are sent back on loan for a short time, and when the time is up, it calls them back down. You are listening to True Horror Vault. Many call massive cruise ships floating cities. Thousands of passengers, hundreds of cabins, endless corridors, the engine deck below, and even further down, restricted areas where regular guests never venture. However, many who work there say, guests aren't the only ones sleeping in those cabins. Today's incident occurred on a large cruise ship departing from the United States on a voyage from Port Miami, Florida, to the Caribbean. Under the condition of anonymity, this story was submitted by the ship's former security officer. We will refer to him as Daniel.
Story 3. The Forbidden Cabin on Deck 9. My name is Daniel. In 2018, I worked as a night security officer on an American cruise liner. There were nearly 4,000 passengers on board. I preferred working the night shift because the corridors were usually empty. Only cameras, silence, and the hum of the sea. However, there was one place where no one wanted to go. Deck 9, Cabin 917. Officially, it was marked as out of service. Passengers were told maintenance was being done on the plumbing. Yet strangely, every night, complaints originated from that cabin. Sometimes the sound of banging on the door. Sometimes a child crying. Sometimes phone calls to the desk. Even though the cabin had been vacant for years. One night, At 2:13 a.m., the control room notified me. The emergency phone in cabin 917 was active again. I said, "Impossible." The dispatcher replied, "No one is visible on camera, but heavy breathing can be heard on the line." I headed there immediately, arriving at the corridor. All the lights were on. However, the moment I stood in front of cabin 917, all the corridor lights went out at once, for just 3 seconds. Then they flickered back on. I knocked on the door. No answer. I unlocked the door using the MasterCard. Inside, there was no one. The bed was neatly made. The balcony window was closed. Yet the air was unnaturally cold, and the entire room smelled of damp saltiness, as if someone wearing soaked clothes had been sitting there for a long time. As I stepped out of the room, I heard a young girl's voice speak very softly behind me. "So?" I turned around. No one was there. Again, "Don't leave me here." Goosebumps broke out across my body. The sound was coming from inside the room. I opened the door again. Once again, the room was empty. However, on the bathroom mirror, water droplets were slowly condensing to form a word. "Help!" I stared frozen for a few seconds. Then the word dissolved on its own. The next morning, I began digging through old records. I discovered that 6 years prior, a family had stayed in that very cabin. A husband, wife, and their 8-year-old daughter. On a stormy night, the little girl suddenly went missing. The entire ship was searched. She was found nowhere. The official report concluded she likely fell overboard into the sea. However, her father's final statement was that he had seen his daughter standing in the corridor at midnight, speaking with someone, even though there was no one else present. From then on, I began reviewing the camera footage of cabin 917. For the first 3 nights, there was nothing. On the 4th night, at 2:13 a.m., a little girl appeared on the camera feed. She was walking slowly down the corridor. Her clothes were soaked. Water dripped from her hair. She walked up and stood in front of cabin 917. Then, she turned and stared directly into the camera lens. I paused the video and zoomed in. My heart sank into my chest. Her eyes were completely black. No white portion at all. Then the video suddenly cut to static. When the picture returned, the corridor was empty. I took the footage to the captain. He took one look at the video and shut the laptop screen. In a very low voice, he said, "Do not show this footage to anyone." I asked, "Why?" He sighed deeply and said, "Because this isn't the first time." He handed me an old file. It stated, over the past 10 years, every year on the exact same date, at 2:13 a.m., the same girl was seen on the cameras, and every security officer who tried to investigate her did not last long in that job. 2 had mental breakdowns. 1 went missing. I decided I would find out the truth one last time. That night, I stood alone in front of cabin 917. The clock struck 2:13 a.m. The corridor lights went out once again. In the dark, a small hand reached out and took hold of mine. The hand was cold as ice. I switched on my flashlight. The little girl was standing right in front of me. She was weeping. She whispered softly, "He is still looking for me." I asked, "Who?" She slowly raised a finger and pointed toward the far end of the corridor. I looked. Standing there was a tall man. His entire body was drenched in water. His face was obscured. However, his head was tilted at an unnatural angle to the side. He took 1 step, 2 steps, advancing slowly toward us. The girl released my hand. She whispered, "Run." I didn't wait another second. I sprinted down the corridor back to the control room. The following morning, cabin 917 was permanently sealed shut. A new door panel was installed. Records were altered. However, among the senior security staff, a rule remains to this day. At 2:13 a.m., along that corridor on deck 9, no one patrols alone. I still go on cruises today. However, before stepping onto any cruise liner, I always check my cabin number first, because I know some cabins are never truly empty. In those rooms, the guests never check out. You are listening to True Horror Vault, Along the east coast of America, legends of centuries-old lighthouses, fishing boats, and phantom vessels still circulate among sailors. Many experienced captains believe that there are certain ships at sea that should never be followed. Today's story took place off the coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The account was sent to us by a former U.S. coastal charter boat captain. To protect his privacy, we will refer to him as Michael. Story 4. The Ghost Boat in the Fog. My name is Michael. For nearly 15 years, I ran charter fishing boat off the coast of Massachusetts. Storms, fog, massive waves. I've seen it all. However, that night in November 2021 altered everything I believed about the ocean. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I was returning to port alone. Having dropped off the passengers, only myself and my deckhand Chris were on board. The weather forecast had been clear. Yet, an unnaturally thick blanket of fog settled over the water without warning. The GPS was operating normally. The radar was functioning too. Yet, an old wooden fishing trawler materialized directly in front of us. The vessel had no navigation lights on. No name was visible on its hull. Chris asked, "Are they in trouble?" I sounded the horn. No response. I called out over the radio. Silence. Yet the boat continued to drift slowly ahead of us. The strange thing was, it had no presence on our radar screen whatsoever. I slowed our speed and followed at a safe distance. Right then, Chris whispered suddenly, "Captain, look at them." I aimed the spotlight toward them, for men were standing on the deck of the trawler. All of them were staring directly at us. No one moved. No one spoke. They were wearing old yellow raincoats. However, the most terrifying detail was, their faces could not be seen. As if deep shadow had consumed their features entirely. We decided to move closer to see if they required assistance. The distance between the two vessels narrowed to barely 30 feet. At that exact moment, scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was coming from beneath our own boat's hull. Chris shone his flashlight downward and froze in place. He said in a trembling voice, "They're underneath us." I looked down, just beneath the surface of the water. Countless pale hands were clinging to the bottom of our boat, as if attempting to drag us downward from below. I pushed the throttle all the way forward. However, even as the engine roared, the boat didn't move an inch forward. It felt as though something was holding us back. Suddenly, the four men on that old trawler turned their heads in unison toward us. This time, their faces were visible. Not faces, only hollow black voids. No eyes, no nose, no lips, only darkness. Then, they raised their hands simultaneously, beckoning us. "Come." There was no physical sound, yet the word echoed clearly inside my mind. Chris suddenly screamed out loud. I turned to see. He was standing right at the edge of the vessel, as if under a hypnotic spell. He was slowly stepping toward the water. I lunged forward and tackled him onto the deck. He kept muttering incoherently, "They want to go home." I held him down firmly. Right at that moment, the old trawler drifted slowly back into the thick fog, and within a single second, it vanished completely. Nothing on the radar, nothing ahead, only fog. We sped back to port with everything the engine had. In the morning, I reported the encounter to the Coast Guard. An elderly officer sat quietly for a long time before bringing out an archive file. The file contained an accident report from 1964. Near Cape Cod, a small fishing boat had vanished inside dense fog. On board were 4 fishermen. None of them were ever found. In the archival photos, they were wearing the exact same style of yellow raincoats. My blood ran cold. A few weeks after the event, Chris resigned from his job. He claimed that nearly every night he had the same recurring dream. Thick fog, an old vessel, and 4 men, repeatedly calling out to him. I myself never ventured out into night fog alone on the ocean again, because I believe not all boats lost at sea truly sink. Some vessels drift forever, and they are constantly looking to take someone new along with them. You are listening to True Horror Vault. Our final story today is based on an event whispered among sailors along the west coast of America for decades. Some dismiss it as pure superstition. Others swear on their lives that they witnessed it with their own eyes. The incident took place aboard a small research vessel traveling from San Francisco Bay toward the Farallon Islands. Under condition of anonymity, the story was submitted by a former marine biologist. We will refer to her as Emily Carter. Story 5. The Final Midnight Count. My name is Emily Carter. It was September 2022. I was aboard a small research vessel monitoring marine life. There were 8 of us in total. The captain, 2 deckhands, 3 researchers, a radio operator, and myself. For the first 2 days, everything was normal. The third night, the time was 12:47 a.m. Suddenly, the power on the entire vessel failed for a second. Once the emergency lights clicked on, the captain asked everyone to report to the deck for a safety check. We lined up in a row. The captain counted us once, then again, then a third time. The color drained from his face. He said softly, 9 people. We all protested together. Impossible. There are only 8 of us. However, I counted us myself, and truly, 9 people were standing there, and the person standing at the very end, I had never seen before in my life. The man was wearing an old Navy-style black raincoat. His face was hidden in the shadow beneath his cap. He stood completely motionless. I thought perhaps he was a new crew member. I asked the captain, "Who is he?" The captain looked at me and whispered, "Don't say anything to anyone." He then recounted everyone. This time, there were only 8. The man was gone. That same night, I went down to the lower storage deck to retrieve samples. Standing at the end of the corridor was that exact same man. This time, his face was visible. His eyes were completely white. His skin was bloated. Seawater leaked continuously from the corners of his mouth. He looked at me and said very slowly, "Count again." As I screamed out, he dissolved into thin air. However, wet boot prints remained on the floor. The following morning, we made the decision to return to port. Because the radio kept malfunctioning, the GPS kept shifting our location erratically, and whenever night fell, an extra person's reflection could be seen in every mirror on the vessel. Whenever we turned to look, no one was there. Around 3 a.m. that night, our radio operator Nathan suddenly screamed. We rushed to the bridge. Trembling, he pointed his finger outside the window. We looked out, surrounding the vessel. On top of the dark water, dozens of people were standing upright. They weren't sinking, nor were they walking. They were simply standing still, staring directly at us. From their mouths, a single phrase echoed in unison. "One more." Suddenly, all the ship's alarms went off at once. The captain yelled, "Everyone to your stations." We ran to take our positions. Right then, as if pulled by an invisible force, Nathan began walking slowly toward the ship's edge. We ran to grab him. However, he turned toward us and simply said, "They recognize me." And then, he leaped into the ocean. We immediately threw a life ring over. We flashed the searchlights. However, Nathan's hand was visible above the water for only a brief second. Then, countless pale hands dragged him beneath the surface. Everything was over within seconds. We returned to port at dawn. The Coast Guard conducted an extensive search. Nathan's body was never recovered. However, during the investigation, an elderly harbor worker shared an old piece of history with us. Nearly 50 years ago, a small research vessel vanished in a storm along that exact same sea route. There were 9 people on board in total. However, the rescue crew's final radio transmission contained only a single sentence. "We are not 8. Now there are 9 of us." I still work in marine research today. However, late at night, if everyone on a vessel is suddenly asked to be counted, I never count a second time, because out at sea, sometimes the extra passenger steps up himself, and if you happen to spot him, then perhaps, in the next count, you won't be there anymore. Which of today's 5 terrifying maritime mysteries creeped you out the most? Be sure to let us know in the comments. If listening to these stories makes you feel that countless unknown mysteries still hide in the dark waters of the ocean, stay tuned with True Horror Vault. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and turn on the notification bell. Because in the next episode, we will bring you even darker, more mysterious, and heart-stopping true-based horror stories from America. Remember, The most terrifying mysteries are never born in imagination. Some mysteries, even today, inside the darkness, are waiting for you.